We can hear the dog snoring just upstairs there as we're sewing in the secret. This is like the bat cave of the quilting. Oh, and then because the robot's quilting the quilt, we're gonna go out and work on the table and keep playing in her film studio and putting that thing together. Excited.
Charisma's Quilting Corner. There she is, everybody. Charisma Horton with special guest Rob Appell. Where'd he go? He's not even there right now.
Okay, folks, it's happening. We are in the downstairs, the secret hideaway of Charisma Horton. Right now, well, this is where the long arms are set up while she's getting the barn finished. And on the frame is Summer Camp. Look at this. And she's over there loading the design right now. And I have Tom Sawyered her into quilting the whole quilt, edge to edge style for me. We've got a really cool video that we're going to talk about why and how you make a relationship with a long armor. This is one of the best reasons. So this is going to be awesome. And just been a great trip so far. You can see the quilt is obviously topped and ready to be completed. This is great. That is right, everybody. Can you believe how blessed we all are to be sitting in the almost completed quilting barn with Charisma Horton, long arm quilter extraordinaire. And if you've been following along, you know the story. If it's your first time to tune in, welcome everybody. I am Rob Appell. This is Charisma Horton. You want to say hi before I just talk forever?
Hi, everybody. Hi, Rob.
Hi, thank you for having me. I have to tell you this story because Charisma has been such a blessing in my life. I was chatting with her. We became friends, during COVID? Was that?
Yeah, 2020, yeah.
Yeah, 2020, working on a couple of quilt projects together. And just hit it off immediately. And so we've just been buddies. We check in on each other about once a month or so. Mm-hmm. And I was telling her about my wild idea once I got the machine painted. I wanted to travel around and create a camping-themed quilt in the car. And she says, Rob,
I have a summer camp quilt. It would be perfect for what you're doing. Just let me send it to you. You'll see. And I did. And now it's history.
Now it's history. And better than that, she invited me to make the quilt, come up here, and in a couple days we're going to go to a quilt show together, and it's just going to be wonderful. But I had a whole different idea of what I wanted to do with the quilting, the actual free motion stitching of the quilt. But as Charisma and I were starting to sit down together, I thought, wow, what an opportunity for all of us together to experience what working with a long arm quilter, establishing that relationship is like, talking about some pattern design. I have several questions. So I'm not going to actually free motion this quilt. Charisma is going to take me on as a client. And so you're going to watch that process, I guess.
Absolutely. Yes.
So then I guess, should I just let you take over now that everybody knows the story?
Sure, yeah. So we have the summer camp quilt. This is my version of the quilt. And so there's a few things when we are approached as long arm quilters that we need to sort of discuss before we decide on a quilting design. Some customers come in, they know exactly what they want, but if you don't, then let's think about a few key things. One of them is cost. How much money do you want to put into this?
Into the quilting?
In the quilting of the quilt, because you've already paid for the pattern, you've put the time in, the fabric, all of those things. So how much more money do you want to invest? Because as a long arm quilter, we have tiers of cost, right? So there is the edge to edge quilting, there's custom quilting, there's show quilting, there's all these things. And so just to break that down a little bit, edge to edge quilting is just one design across the whole body of the quilt. In this case, this one was called Fire. And so this is just an even design that covers all of the quilt. You're not paying attention to any of the elements of the patchwork that you've put in. You're just simply covering it with a design. Custom quilting would be where I might do a design in this tent, and then I'm going to do another design in this.
I'm just going to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Because I have your fabulous quilt.
Yes, the fabulous quilt that we worked together. Yes.
So let's just use this as an example, and if I hold it still, can you kind of point?
Yes, absolutely.
Let's see. I'll just, does this help at all?
Yeah, so we have a corner of it here. And so what we have here is that, in this star, we did a design, and then we did something in the background here. And then this black right here is like the main background of this quilt. And so we did stars here. We did continuous curves and all of these checks. We did spirals and feathers in those star points. So that is custom quilting. So we're paying attention to the elements of each quilt. Like each quilt block got its own design. the background got its design. And so we're trying to make give all of these units a lot of texture and have each element of that come out. So that takes a little bit more time. It takes a little bit more money. But one of the other elements of that is, what are you going to do with the quilt at the end? If it's going to be a wall hanging, you might want to pay that extra money for custom quilting. If you're giving it to your senior grandson for graduation, maybe an all over edge to edge, because what are they going to care about more? They're going to care more about the colors that you chose, the pattern that you chose. They don't necessarily care about the quilting, and you want something that is probably going to be more like an all over, because they're probably going to wash it a lot, or not. If it's a teenage boy, I know what they're like.
I told you she was experienced.
So you sort of have to, think about, how much investment do you want to put in that, and who are you giving it to? What is the end result?
That makes a lot of sense.
So, and then on top of that, as a pattern designer, we also have to think about our customer in the end, right? So if I put 100 hours of quilting into this, I wouldn't do that. Even custom quilting is not going to take me 100 hours. But let's just say that if I take this to a show, sometimes they're going to say, well, I can't make it look like that. So, you want to make it approachable. And so that makes it more sellable or, marketable in a way. So a lot of my quilts will get an edge to edge or something maybe kind of a little bit simple. We went a little crazy with Fabulous because, it was fabulous. So
we can still do that. Yes. So originally I was thinking that it'd be really fun to, like I usually do, use matching color threads. So like for the yellow stars and moon, I was going to use yellow. I was going to do different greens and trees in the background and change for the tents and different stuff. But to me, that would fall into the world of custom.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? And then also it would take a lot more time.
Correct.
Involvement. We have a little bit of a deadline we're on, so that's part of our decision-making factor. Mm-hmm. There's another piece of art that I would rather be doing while the computer, because with this choice we're about to make, we're going to allow a computer to do a majority of the work?
Correct. So I own 3 long arms. I sort of carved my niche doing custom quilting, but later in my quilting career, which is the opposite of probably everybody else, I bought a computerized machine. And so it's so easy just to download that digital design and then let it do all of the work. So we've sort of decided to do that here. And, with thread changes and everything in quilts, some people will do that. And, the thing about that is, even if you're custom quilting, when you do a lot of thread changes, it adds a lot of time, because you have to think about even quilting when you're quilting, like even across the board. So if you go through and you change all of the threads as you're going through this, there's a couple ways to approach that. One is you could go through and do all of the background blue, which means you have to go through the whole quilt, and then you have to like roll it up and roll it down. And every time, then, you might approach it with the golds. So you're starting at the top and you're going to do that. But then you still have these green trees not quilted. So then you have to make a decision at that point. Are you going to take the thread off and do the green and then go down? Because then when you get to this third row, you're going to have to do green, that sort of coral color, decide what you want to do with the fire, the blue, and then, the green. And so you have all of this unevenness, and that gives way for puckers and pleats and things in the back of the quilt. And this is a pretty evenly dispersed quilt, so you're probably going to be okay with this one. But sometimes if you have a quilt that has maybe a really dense color over here and then not over here, you have to make the decision, are you just going to change it every single row? That just becomes very time consuming. It becomes cumbersome. If you're not doing it for a show quilt, why do it?
Yeah. And plus, I've always been under the impression that with every start and stop, there's a new knot. And with every knot, it can come untied and the threads can come out over time. It's just a little bit more of a hazard as well. So, and also with this, I had mentioned to Charisma, we've been enjoying being in the Pacific Northwest and also chasing Sasquatch. I believe I might have caught a glimpse, maybe even 2, while I was out on the road last week over in Oregon and Washington. So at any rate, we thought it'd be fun if we somehow hid a Sasquatch in there. And Charisma and I were discussing about how would we create the design? Would we put it on paper? Would we pounce it? Would we stencil it? All of these things. And then she said, but you know what? I bet you there is a long arm design that I could purchase. And the other reason I want to mention this is there's a lot of you out there that are either owners of long arm, mid arms that are computer guided,
yes.
Or you're considering it. And these are some of the things that you might need these questions answered. So yes, we have found actually 2 different Sasquatch Bigfoot designs. One we both like much better than the other.
Yes.
We've purchased it. We are going to upload it to the computer. Am I saying all of this right?
Yes,
okay.
absolutely.
We're going to upload it to the computer and then, upload it from the computer to the machine.
Yes.
And then we're going to be able to stitch it out. And technically I could change colors within, but we're just going to let it do one solid color because that was my next question to Charisma. Usually I change colors for either impact or to hide if I don't feel comfortable. How do you answer the question of if I'm going to pick one color, because that's what we're going to do now, we're going to pick one color. How do we choose what color for a quilt that has so many colors in it?
Right, so that's a popular question. And so in this particular one, I chose the blue that matched the background. And the reason I did that is because it covers most of the quilt. That's not true all of the time for you to do that, but in this case it did. And the reason it did is because it's a dark background. And so like black is the, not the essence of color.
Oh, black is the absence of color, where
of
white
color.
is
Yes, so,
all of the colors combined.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. Thank you for finishing that for me.
You're
so
welcome.
Since it's the absence of color, you can sort of blend that in. And so that is sort of how this blue is working. You can see it a little bit in the yellow, but the other trick when you're quilting is to use a finer thread. So this is a 70 weight thread. As a long arm quilter, a lot of people use that 40 weight cotton, and maybe the normal quilter does not see it, but as a long arm quilter, I see it because to me it's a very thick thread and it can take over. But with a 70 weight thread, or an 80 weight poly usually, they're very thin and they sort of just kind of blend in a little bit nicer and you don't see it as much, and I think that you can blend it in.
But you can, I know I'm interrupting, but you can still totally see the stitching as well, but it doesn't overpower the quilt.
Correct.
That was my fear, especially up in the yellows, that the blue would overpower. And I had suggested, well, what if we did yellow? What would happen there? And I think you had a little bit less of...
Right, yellow would take over the whole quilt. Well, and yellow is sort of different, right? Because I don't know, we all did that trick when we were a kid in art class where, they would put up a picture and they would tell you, close your eyes for 15 seconds, then open them. What's the first color you see? And everybody says yellow, no matter how many, how much yellow is in the quilt. If it's a little bit or a lot, yellow can kind of take over. But so even if I were to put gray on this, you're going to see it all except for maybe in this like blue or some of the like gray toned trees, but you would see it on absolutely everything. So I sort of took the path of least resistance by choosing the blue because it doesn't overpower it. It's a thinner thread and it just kind of gives it a nice overall texture. And the other thing with an overall design like that is that if it's consistent, it blends in more. If I were to do a custom quilting and then use that blue, I'm just sort of accentuating that blue thread, and you don't want to do that. So then that's when you would change your thread colors or choose something neutral for those areas.
Got it. So you're kind of first looking for the background color,
right?
The majority of the quilt.
Correct.
And hoping it's a dark versus a light in comparison to the rest of the blocks.
Right.
Because the darker the thread in comparison to the rest of the quilt, it's going to have less contrast, less show. Yes. Using a finer thread. And these are all tricks from years and years of experience. Okay, so what if somebody is bringing you, and you can get on her website and send her quilts, please do, as a matter of fact. Well, come on. At any rate, do you want them to send thread? Do you want them to send batting?
No, well, they can send batting if they have one that they prefer, but as a long arm quilter, we tend to like our own thread because we have our favorites, and we also, every time you change a thread on a machine, a thread brand or a thickness, you have to change the tensions, and sometimes our machines don't like certain threads or whatever. They're kind of finicky that way. And
my guess was going to be like, heavens no, please leave it all at home, because batting as well.
We get used to our normal threads, and we like them and that sort of thing. So just if you have a color, then we match the color, but we like our own kind of threads. Each machine likes its own thread, I should say.
Okay, can you handle one more question?
Yeah.
I think this is the question we're all really dying to ask, because I think this is how most long armors build up their stash. You're always asking for more backing than quilt top, and we just assume it's because you want the extra for your personal use later. But what's the real answer? Why? How much extra do you need, and why? Can you give us a minute on that?
Yes, absolutely. So there's a couple things. One is that, so I asked for 4 inches on all sides. So if you're just sending an extra wide quilt back, that would be 8 inches wider and longer. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is that quilting is fluid. So as straight as you make a quilt, or that you think you make a quilt, quilting just, it is fluid. So you will end up sometimes with it being maybe a little bit larger than you thought it was, but most of the time it's going to be a little bit smaller, just because quilting kind of sucks in inches. So just as I was talking about evenly quilting across a quilt at the beginning of this, that is sort of a thing. When you're a long arm quilter, you want to make sure that you're keeping the quilt straight as you go, and a lot of fluctuation in that. So there's a skill in making sure that everything stays straight as you quilt down the quilt. So part of that is it being fluid. The second thing is that messing with tension, it happens to all of us. We need to have a little practice space. We need to make sure that our machine is oiled. We need to make sure that, all of the threads are good. So we need to have a little practice space. And if something goes wrong, we need to have that little space. The third reason is we need it to load the quilt.
Yeah, I was thinking about
that. So everyone has a different loading system, but I use the little red snappers. And so we need 2 to 3 inches to, get those snapped in. So you always need that extra space. And, it happens all the time. I tell everybody not to feel bad when it happens, but they will send me a backing that they think is big enough, but it's not, because once I pin it on, then I, kind of roll it up and test it out. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to run out of room. I don't have enough room for the quilt. So do send that extra inches. It's very important.
Minimum of 8,
yes.
Longer and wider.
Yes,
so that
absolutely.
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so is there anything else we should share before we take this over to the long arm and get rocking and rolling?
No, I think we're pretty good.
Awesome. This is exciting.
Yes.
Thank you very much for talking with us all and teaching me. And I guess as I wrap up kind of this whole video series, quilting in nature, not only was it way better than I expected, a lot more fun, but I also ran into some extra things, weather challenges and different little things that happen along the way. But I guess life is just very much like quilting in that matter. And I like it when I get to hang out with people that have other, and I'm just going to say right now, better ideas than I do, so that I can benefit and we can all grow together. So thank you for being here for this, and we'll make sure you get to see the finished quilt as soon as I finish talking Charisma. Do you see what I did here, folks? Charisma is now going to quilt my quilt for me. I did it! Yay! Can I get a high five on that one too?
Yep, absolutely.
You're awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and there it is, folks. Can you believe it? Fresh off the long arm. I'm super, super excited. Could you see that? There's Bigfoot and trees and the actual Sasquatch himself, or herself, sorry, quilted into the background design. I think it's super, super cool. Many, many thanks to Charisma and her expertise on the long arm quilting. I did end up binding it in the green. I had some strips of the green I brought with me just for the photography. I thought that'd be really fun. That way I've kind of customized it myself. Your pattern will call for binding it in the background color of the blue. But anyways, I just thought it'd be fun to do that while I was here. The whole project is done. You've seen it, all of the steps. I will be making a really fun other movie just to show you all of the process and everything. So make sure you get to check that out as well. But this has been a huge blessing. Thank you all for following me along on the incredible progressive quilt camping adventure. I think that's what we've decided to call this thing. Anyways, I'm super blessed, super excited. I can't wait for all of you to make your own version of summer camp. And also don't forget, Charisma has a bunch of amazing, I mean like bunches, hundreds of amazing patterns, but I've got another great series of patterns I think you'll really dig if you like this one as well. So we've got those available for you. Super excited, super blessed. And thank you folks for being here. Until we do another amazing project together, please stay well. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of the video. It really helps support our channel. If you haven't subscribed, do so now. Hit the little button to be notified every time we go live or do a new video for all of you. And here's one from the past I think you'll really enjoy.